morning, everybody. It is 7 o'clock. Very welcome to join us on The Breakfast Show on Sky News. A development overnight in the hunt for a missing aristocrat. We're live on the scene of a massive police search in Brighton. Plus, can the PM get his Brexit deal over the line with the DUP? The Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly, on the programme very shortly, and the shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Peter Kyle, in the 8 o'clock hour. It's Tuesday, the 28th of February. Police search in Brighton as an aristocrat is arrested with her partner, but a newborn baby is still missing.
The couple were reported missing after their car broke down near Bolton last month.
If it's make or break for the Windsor framework anywhere, it's here in Northern Ireland. The restoration of power-sharing government at last hangs on its success.
I'm on a picket line in Leeds as teachers across the north of England strike over pay. The Education Secretary says it's unacceptable.
I'm in Beijing, where Belarus President and Putin ally Alexander Lukashenko is due for a state visit. It comes as concerns increase that China may start selling arms to Russia.
How football fans in Turkey chose to give gifts to children affected by the earthquake by throwing teddy bears onto the pitch. The Southern Lights, a treat for stargazers down south, as the Northern Lights put on a show for a second night. Remembering Betty, tributes to the Tiller girl turned top politician, will be joined by the current Speaker, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, at 8:30. We're marking 50 years of pride with some of the biggest names in showbiz telling us what the anniversary means to them. Good morning. Breaking news from overnight and a development in the hunt for a missing aristocrat. The couple sparked a nationwide police hunt after they went missing with their newborn baby. They've now been found and arrested, but police say the baby is missing and a search is underway. Saba has got more for us now in Brighton. What on earth's going on there? Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. Well, as you say, Constance Marten and Mark Gordon have been spotted in Brighton, not too far from where we are, by a member of the public just last night down the road from here before 9:30 p.m. They were subsequently arrested and are in police custody. But here's the main thing. Their newborn child, who was with them and had been spotted with them, is now missing, and a major police operation to find their child is currently underway, as I'm sure you can see behind me. Now, originally this was a missing persons operation for the family of three who have been sighted up and down the country, first in Liverpool, in Essex, in South London, and also in East Sussex. Now the police are saying that if members of the public have any information, that they should urgently come forward, because they have serious concerns for the child's welfare, who they believe was born just a month ago, and they're urging people to phone 999 as soon as they can if they have information.
Yeah, this baby, about a month old, as you said, and it's not with the parents. They've been travelling up and down the country. The police must be desperately worried about what's happened.
Absolutely, they are, and at the moment, there's not a huge amount of information they can say, but from speaking with them earlier, they did say that extensive searches are going on in the area from where the couple were spotted last night just before 9:30 p.m. And as soon as we have any further updates, we'll let you know.
OK, thank you. In other news, the Prime Minister is expected to travel to Northern Ireland today after securing a deal that he says will be a turning point for the region. He'll be hoping to get the backing of the DUP, who've said there are still some issues of concern. Here's what's been agreed. First, a twin-lane system for customs. The Green Lane will allow trusted traders to send goods from Britain into Northern Ireland without checks. Meanwhile, goods destined for Ireland and the EU single market will go through the Red Lane. VAT rates, and state aid policy will be set by Westminster rather than by Brussels. There'll also be a Stormont break, allowing Northern Ireland's Assembly to prevent EU laws applying. But the European Court of Justice will keep the final say on single market issues, a significant sticking point for Tory Eurosceptics and the DUP.
In broad terms, it is clear that significant progress has been secured across a number of areas, whilst also recognising that there remain key issues of concern. Where necessary, we stand ready to engage with the Government in order to seek further clarification, reworking or change as required.
Well, the senior Tory backbencher David Davis, who quit as Brexit Secretary over Theresa May's negotiation strategy, had this message for Brexiteers in his party.
I'd say to them, read this carefully, go through it, compare it with the other things that you've already voted for. Remember, most of these members of my party have voted for Boris's deal. This is much better than Boris's deal. From a sovereignty point of view, from a trade point of view, from a democracy point of view, it's better.
Well, our correspondents David Blevins and Adam Parsons are at Stormont and also in Brussels, respectively, this morning. David, to you, first of all, is this deal going to get over the line?
Well, the DUP have not said yes, but notably nor have they reverted to their traditional default position of saying no. Instead, we've got this mixed message thing going on where the party leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, is rather conciliatory, suggesting there's been progress, commending the Prime Minister for his efforts and committing to study the document line by line, every detail of it. On the other hand, one of his MPs, Ian Paisley, has already said it doesn't cut the mustard. They're still concerned about the sovereignty question, about who ultimately has the last say on EU law in Northern Ireland. The question is, can that be mitigated enough to see this place, the devolved government of Northern Ireland, up and running again before the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement? Michelle O'Neill, who's been First Minister in waiting for more than a year, is urging the Unionists to form a government with her so that they fill the political vacuum and send a very clear message to those who, even just last week, were illustrating that the peace is very fragile.
OK, it was quite the loving yesterday, wasn't it, Adam?
Yeah, and I think that was indicative of a far improved relationship between the European Union and the UK. I've spoken to a number of people who were operating behind the scenes on this deal, and all of them, without exception, have said that that was fundamental to getting the deal done. Now, I don't think we should read into that Ursula von der Leyen and Rishi Sunak have suddenly become great friends. What we're talking about is a good professional relationship in contrast to an absolutely terrible relationship. Previously, last night, I spoke to one of those who was involved in the negotiations and said that when Boris Johnson was talking, nobody was listening, and that nobody wanted to talk to Lord Frost. In the previous round of negotiations, that has all changed now. The EU thinks that they have made significant concessions. What they want is a deal to get this across the line. A deal may not be perfect, they say, but a deal is better than no deal.
Putting all of that to the Foreign Secretary, who we heard from the Prime Minister yesterday, said was integral to this deal. He's coming up in just a few minutes' time. 7:30. I'm going to be speaking to Kevin Courtney of the National Education Union as teachers begin 3 days of strike action. 8:15, speaking to the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, as the war rages in Ukraine and issues with airspace over Moldova. And the shadow Northern Ireland Secretary Peter Carl will give us Labour's take on yesterday's major deal. That's at just after 8. Thousands of teachers are beginning a 3-day strike this morning across northern England in a dispute over pay. The Education Secretary Gillian Keegan says it's unforgivable.
It was a serious offer to pause strikes, get round the table and to come in and to talk about all of the issues that were part of the dispute. That was a serious offer. The nurses have taken up that offer. They've been in discussions ever since then. The teaching union has not. And that's very disappointing, and particularly the impact it's going to have on children.
Well, let's get more on this, should we? Standing by, our North of England correspondent Shingi Marariki is on a picket line in Leeds for 3 days of strike starting in the north where you are, Shingi. Good morning.
Good morning, Kay. That's right. Those 3 days of strike action will involve hundreds of thousands of teachers, according to the NEU, the largest teaching union, over pay. Just like across the board in so many other sectors, they're asking for a pay increase above inflation. The picket line here at this school in Leeds has started. You can hear them chanting. You can hear them voicing their discontent with the government. And I have one of those teachers with me, Vicky, who's taught here for 30 years. Just tell us why you're out here today and why this matters so much to you.
I think this matters so much because it's about the future of our society. That I've been teaching here for 30 years and we have had a cut in funding for the past 12 years. We've been papering over the cracks, but now, as you can see, we're not able to do that anymore, and we need to be providing for the future of our country, and we need to be at the top of the government's agenda, and that's why we're here.
And what do you think about the government's position they've laid out, which is essentially they want you to stop your strike action, then they'll come to the table? Thoughts on that?
I feel that there needs to be some middle ground, that they absolutely need to come to the table, and they need to the majority of people here, it's not about how much money they're going to increase our pay. It needs to be funded, because if it's not funded, our head teachers cannot provide the support for the children. They have to find the money elsewhere, and that is what concerns us as a profession.
Thank you very much, Vicky. So there you have it. They think it's about the future of our young people, and that's what matters to them. If they don't reach some sort of deal with the government and break this impasse, then there's the potential for more strike action in March.
OK, Shingi, thank you. Looking at some of today's other top stories for you now here on The Breakfast Show, a fertility regulator is calling for children born via sperm or egg donation to be given the right to learn about their birth parents before the age of 18. The Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority has begun a consultation that will run for 6 weeks. There's a warning that tax hikes or spending cuts would be needed for the government to end strike action over public sector pay disputes. The Institute for Fiscal Studies says the government is not able to raise public sector pay to match inflation, despite the UK being on course to borrow £30 billion less than forecast. Long waits for A&E treatment contributed to more than 23,000 excess deaths last year. Data from the Royal College of Emergency Medicine suggests waits of more than 12 hours in A&E created catastrophic consequences for safety. NHS England disagrees. Spokesperson told us the cause of excess deaths is down to a number of different factors, and so attributing deaths to one exact thing, as the figures quoted by the RCEM attempt to do, is very unlikely to give a full or certain picture. A rapist who self-identified as female during criminal proceedings will be sentenced at Edinburgh High Court today. Isla Bryson was removed from a female prison after being found guilty of raping 2 women between 2016 and 2019. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon suggested the rapist was almost certainly faking being transgender. Police in Ecuador seized nearly 9 tonnes of cocaine hidden in a container of bananas bound for Belgium. The police say the shipment would have been worth more than £270 million had it reached its destination. Say what you like about football fans. Sometimes they've got huge hearts. Here we go. Match between 2 top-flight Turkish football teams was paused as fans threw teddies and other fluffy toys onto the pitch for the children caught up in the earthquakes that hit Turkey and Syria. The match was suspended for 4 minutes and 17 seconds, a reference to the time the first earthquake struck 3 weeks ago. Warm clothing also thrown onto the pitch for those who are trying to survive under canvas in sub-zero temperatures. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, a close ally of Vladimir Putin, is visiting Beijing, prompting further concerns that China may consider providing military aid to Russia. Let's get more on this, should we? Helen Ann standing by for us this morning. Helen Ann, what are they up to?
Well, we understand that President Lukashenko will be arriving in Beijing today. He's staying until Thursday. And we understand that as part of this state visit, he will also be meeting President Xi Jinping himself. Now, look, both sides, both the Belarusians and the Chinese, are billing this as a reasonably ordinary visit between two leaders, two allies. They say they're going to talk about things from the economy to humanitarian aid, trade and a number of other things. But of course, the context for this and the reason it matters so much is the conflict in Ukraine, and particularly the timing, just that 1 year on last week since the conflict broke out. Now, Belarus and Alexander Lukashenko, the president of Belarus, is a staunch Putin ally. He's been one of Putin's strongest supporters during this conflict. Actually, part of the invasion was actually launched via Belarusian territory. The Chinese, on the other hand, have been extremely careful for the year of this conflict to not be seen to be taking sides. They have never overtly condemned or condoned the war, but quietly, as time has gone on, they have provided financial assistance to the Russians. They have certainly provided diplomatic cover. And the West is nervous because there have been perhaps increasing signals in recent months and weeks that China might be moving slightly closer to the Russians over this, not least warnings from the Americans that they are worried and have intelligence that Russia might be preparing to sell arms to the Russians. If that were to happen, of course, that escalates things significantly. So in the eyes of the West, this state visit, another worrying signal, the Chinese saying that it's just part of their efforts, they say, to try and be a broker of peace within the conflict.
OK, thank you. Joining us now is the Foreign Secretary, James Cleverly. Lots to talk about. Let's just touch on that, should we, very briefly. What are the Chinese and the Belarusians up to?
Well, look, we will look very, very closely at what statements come out from this meeting. The simple truth is this war is unprovoked, it was illegal, it was unjustified. We have made it absolutely clear that we're helping the Ukrainians defend themselves, but also, as I said in New York at the United Nations at the tail end of last week, we are also defending the UN Charter, international law, territorial integrity, all these things.
OK. The deal that was done in 2019 for Brexit, did we not already have a deal then? Why did we have to do another deal?
So I think the deal that was done, the oven-ready deal,
yeah,
that was the withdrawal agreement. That was to enable us to actually leave the European Union, which we did in January of 2020. So what we have been doing, what we've been negotiating over the last few months, and what was resolved yesterday between the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen, was the details about ensuring that Northern Ireland remains a meaningful, full part of the United Kingdom, whilst also, of course, having privileged access to the European single market, making sure that the institutions of the Good Friday Agreement, particularly the Stormont Executive, are back up and running, and resolving these last residual issues in terms of that relationship.
When you say last residual issues, I've got a little list. Sausages and chilled meats banned under the old protocol. Now it's been fixed. Parcels, unnecessary bureaucracy fixed. Online shopping, extra barriers now fixed. Unplanted potatoes banned now fixed. Pets, costly certificates banned now fixed. The list goes on and on and on. Lots of people would have thought that had already been sorted out. It quite clearly had not. The leader of the opposition is now saying that this is a compromise, what you're offering. Why is he wrong?
I mean, the leader of the opposition wouldn't understand, I think, how negotiations work, it seems, because what this is... Well, I mean, if
goodness me!
Well,
Get Keir Starmer on the phone, somebody.
Well, if he describes it as a compromise, I think what I've heard is business leaders, community leaders, representatives of the retail community, the spokesperson from the Guide Dogs Association, a whole load of other people really welcome what we've achieved, because what we've achieved is something that a lot of people said we could never achieve, which is a negotiated change to the treaties that underpin the cross-Irish Sea trade and also the relationship with Northern Ireland and Ireland. We've got now a really, really good result. It means that Northern Ireland is in the same tax environment as the rest of the UK. It means that...
If the deal's signed off, it's not been signed off yet.
Well, it means that products from within the UK can flow as freely from Birmingham to
if the deal's
Belfast.
Signed off, it's not been signed off yet.
But this is a really, really good This is a really, really good agreement, which, as I say, protects Northern Ireland's part of the UK, also gives them that privileged access to the single market, and I think really, really importantly, gives the elected representatives of the people of Northern Ireland a genuine say in the rules and regulations that affect
You need
them.
the DUP on side. What's the boss going to say when he goes to Northern Ireland this morning?
Well, I think what he's going to do is going to talk through the practicalities of what's been agreed. We listened very, very carefully to the people, the businesses and the elected representatives in Northern Ireland, particularly the unionist community and their representatives, who really felt that the protocol was severing that incredibly important link between Northern Ireland and the rest of the United Kingdom.
And that was because your old boss, your big buddy, said that there wouldn't be a border down the Irish Sea. And it might be a softer one now, but it's still there.
So when it comes to the movement of goods within the UK, there will be no greater regulatory burden than moving things from Birmingham to Braintree.
Still a border?
No, there isn't.
OK, so why do we need to have green and red
Because the red lane is for stuff that ultimately will be crossing a border into the European Union, into Ireland, into the European Union. But within the UK, there is no border. The regulatory environment is exactly the same as if it's moving anywhere else within the UK. Products that weren't available in Northern Ireland will be available. Meat products, sausages, for example, seed potatoes from Scotland,
Yeah, I know, you told us all that had been fixed previously.
Yes. So this means that the nursery, the garden centre that I visited in Northern Ireland, who could not get roses, who could not get oak saplings, who could not get
because of your old boss,
who could not get seed potatoes, they can now get all of these things just as easily as if they're in my constituency.
So the DUP don't agree with you, then they don't understand negotiations either, like Keir Starmer?
They are going to quite understandably want to look at the detail of this.
What if they don't agree with you?
Of course, they will want to look at the detail of this. But I really hope that once they look at the detail of this, they will see that we have taken their concerns very, very, very seriously. Well, I'm going to give, and I know them, respect them very, very much, and they know. I know all the MPs of the DUP, and I've had a chance to meet their leadership in Northern Ireland. I think they will know that I've been very, very focused on the concerns that they have expressed on behalf of their community.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
That they will have real authority when it comes to the Stormont break. They will have a genuine say.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Well, what I really, really hope is they'll look at this and they will understand.
But do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Well, look, ultimately, this is about making sure that the people of Northern Ireland are served properly. That means getting the Stormont up and running.
But do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Well, if they don't re-enter the power sharing executive, that will be hugely disappointing. I think that won't be good news for the people of Northern Ireland. But I think this deal.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Ultimately.
Yes.
We want Stormont up and running. That is something, and what I want to do, and I know you're.
No question for us.
What I want to do is I want to give the DUP, I want to give the representatives of the unionist community the chance to read this.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
I want them to.
How many times do I have to ask you?
Because I know what you want to do. You want to try.
I want you to tell me the answer.
Well,
and it's a yes or no. I'm not trapping you. I'm asking you: do they still have the power to scupper a deal, the DUP, or are they not as powerful as they used to be?
Well, you see, and that's why I'm not going to be drawn into this because this is not.
Reasonable question.
Because actually the real giveaway was the subsequent question about are they not as powerful as they used to be. The DUP are passionate representatives of their communities in Northern Ireland. They raised a number of concerns about the implementation of the protocol. We listened very, very carefully, and we have systematically gone through to resolve the issues, to make sure that the tax and regulatory environment.
We know the details. We know the details. I've just read them all out for people.
Well,
we went through all of those. Then you wouldn't have to. But you won't answer my question about the DUP and whether they're still powerful enough.
So you'll recognise that the Commission has moved a very, very long way from the starting point. That they've agreed things that we were told with great confidence would never be agreed.
OK, if you won't answer that question, let me ask you the one about the King, if I may, just before I let you go. I know that you're a little bit cross about talking about the King. Who asked for the King to speak to host Mrs von der Leyen? Was it Downing Street or was it Buckingham Palace?
Well, obviously, we arranged for Ursula von der Leyen to come to the UK to conduct the final part of the negotiation. We of course, informed the Palace, and ultimately with the visiting of any senior international
So you
representative.
said to the king, get the best china out, and he said, yeah, OK.
Whether it be President Zelensky or President von der Leyen from the EU. So, but ultimately, decisions about the King's Diary are rightly for the Palace.
8 minutes flies by, doesn't it? It's good to talk to you as always. Thanks very much indeed.
You,
Thanks
Kay.
a lot.
Thank
Quick look
you.
at the papers for you. The new deal between the UK and the EU is the lead story for many, including the Eye. The Mail asks, has the Prime Minister actually achieved the impossible? Lots of people think so. The Guardian hails a new chapter in relations with the EU. The Times, Brexit breakthrough, says The Times. Telegraph quotes the Prime Minister saying his deal is a new way forward. Metro says we can finally put the oven on. See what they did there? And stargazers had another treat last night as the Northern Lights gave another sparkling display in the night skies. How beautiful. I love the Northern Lights. Also known as the Aurora Borealis, the rare display could be seen above the skies of Chorley Wood in Hertfordshire, caused by a combination of different gases and the effects of the Earth's magnetic field that makes up the colours and wave patterns as seen in the Wirral as well. Very, very beautiful. Quick look at the weather.
Warm memories wherever you go. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Largely dry and settled, but staying chilly with overnight frost where skies are clearing.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Looking at our climate dashboard for you now. I always look at the coal first. Less than 1% of our energy mix is coal at the moment. Not many renewables, though. A lot of gas we're using today. As you can see, this is how much it is hotter since 1880. And this is CO2 emissions in millions of tonnes in real time. Now then, it's more than 50 years since 1 million people first took to the streets of London in support of Pride. And to celebrate, photographer Thomas Knights has taken 50 portraits of LGBTQ plus people. There you go. Great pictures. The portraits will form part of an exhibition launching today and featuring some of the biggest names in showbiz. Plus, they've spoken about what the anniversary means to them. Amazing. Talking about that in more detail later on in the programme. Still to come, is it a monkey, an elf, or some kind of ghostly apparition? What did Mexico's president see in his garden? Looks like an owl to me. Telling you before the break about the Mexican president who's posted a picture to his social media showing what looks to be a mythical creature similar to an elf. The president appeared to be serious when he posted the photo on Twitter, which has now been viewed millions of times. He described it as an alux, which is a small, mischievous creature similar to elves that are supposed to live in forests. Others have suggested it was a monkey or an unwelcome intruder. I think it's probably a monkey. It looks like a monkey, doesn't it? Now, we're going to be telling you about what the Foreign Secretary said about the DUP and whether they are still relevant with the new accord that we heard about yesterday between the Prime Minister and Ursula von der Leyen. What did he have to say? Stay tuned, find out. Before that, around 200,000 teachers in England will today begin 3 days of industrial action as their long-running dispute over pay continues. Let's talk about it in more detail. Joining us, the Joint General Secretary of the National Education Union, Kevin Courtney. Hello to you, Mr. Courtney. Thanks for joining us on the programme this morning. What impact will these 3 days of strikes have on schools?
Well, lots of schools will be affected. Many children will have to remain at home. And I want to say to you, Kay, We sincerely regret the disruption to children's education and to parents' working and home lives today. But we think we're taking action for a high moral purpose, to try and get the government to invest in this generation of children who are being ignored by this government. So there will be disruption on the 3 days of action. It's strike today in the north, tomorrow in the Midlands, on Thursday in the south. And we regret that disruption, but we want government to invest in this generation of children.
Impact on exam students?
Well, I mean, it's the same point being made. We regret that disruption. Now, teachers will work really hard with those exam classes. They want their children to do well in the exams that are coming up. But we make the point that there are GCSE chemistry classes without teachers who are qualified in chemistry. There are GCSE maths classes that are being taught without teachers who are qualified in maths. And that is impacting on those children exams preparation every day. And we're trying to get government to invest in order to overcome those problems.
OK, so does that mean that exam students will be impacted?
They certainly will. I mean, many schools, the exam classes will be in school, but there will be schools where they're out. There will be schools where those children are out of school. If they're out of school, I think they should be doing exam preparation. That's what they could do this afternoon if they're not coming on our demonstration. But my point to you, Kay, is that their education is being disrupted every day by the fact that we haven't got enough teachers in our schools, enough qualified teachers. We don't have enough permanent teachers. There are temporary teachers doing their best, but children are being disrupted every single day, and that's because the government has let teacher recruitment and retention fall to such perilous levels. There have been pay cuts, there have been pay rises less than inflation almost every year since this government was elected in 2010, and they are carrying on now. The pay rise last September was 5% when inflation was 12%. The pay rise they're forecasting for this September is 3%, and forecasts of inflation are 10% on RPI for this September, even though it's starting to fall, or 6% on CPI. And those pay cuts are leading to a situation where we don't have enough teachers in our schools. And in addition, when they make pay rises, they often don't fund them properly, so that schools have to make cuts to fund the pay rises. And that's why our members are taking a stand, and they see themselves, and I agree with them, taking a stand for the children they teach. They are standing up for education, they are standing up for their profession, and they are trying to make sure that this government invests in this generation of children. The generation of children hit so hard by COVID, we're trying to make sure the government invests in that generation of children.
Mr Courtney, clear this up for me, if you would, please. Reported that your Joint General Secretary missed a very important meeting with the Education Secretary because she was enjoying the Norwegian fjords. Is that right?
We were fully represented at that meeting. I was at that meeting. Mary had a long-booked cruise on over half-term holiday that she'd booked with a friend many years before, a couple of years before, and we agreed she could go to that because I would be at the meeting with the Secretary of State. This is mischief-making by the Department for Education. It is not a way to build trust in the negotiations, because what they haven't told you is that a minister, Nick Gibb, was also not at that meeting because he was on a half-term break. Why do they tell you one part of that and not the other part? It's just mischief-making on their part, and it damages the prospect of reaching an agreement because they destroy trust in the negotiation process.
Because Nick Gibb's not asking teachers to go on strike, and your Joint General Secretary is, probably.
Well, we're not asking members to go on strike. Our members have voted in overwhelming numbers to go on strike. This government really doesn't like the fact that working people are allowed to take strike action, but they are taking strike action. It's the most effective strike action we've had, I think, since the 1980s in terms of the number of people involved in it. The fact that 50,000 people have joined our union, 50,000 people have joined our union since we announced our ballot results on January the 16th, tells you that teachers, it's not us, it's not me and Mary making people go on strike. Teachers have had enough. They want the government to invest in them, invest in their profession, and invest in the education of the children in our schools.
OK. It's good to talk to you. As we said, these strikes going on for, I think, 3 days. So I'm sure we'll chat again, or perhaps there will be a deal before that. I'm sure that so many students and teachers live in hope that that's the case. But for now, thank you for joining us as always. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks. Let's return to that big story this morning. Continued scrutiny of the Prime Minister's new deal on Northern Ireland with the EU. Rishi Sunak is heading to Northern Ireland today, and all eyes are on whether the DUP will be reassured with the new deal. Earlier, I asked the Foreign Secretary 8 times whether the DUP actually have the power to scupper a deal.
Well, look, ultimately, this is about making sure that the people of Northern Ireland are served properly. That means getting the Stormont up and running.
But do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Well, if they don't re-enter the power sharing executive, that will be hugely disappointing. I think that won't be good news for the people of Northern Ireland. But I think this deal.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
Ultimately,
yes.
We want Stormont up and running. That is something, and what I want to do, and I know you're.
No question for us.
What I want to do is I want to give the DUP, I want to give the representatives of the unionist community the chance to read this.
Do they still have the power to scupper a deal?
I want them to.
How many times do I have to ask you?
Because I know what you want to do. You want to try.
I want you to tell me the answer.
Well,
and it's a yes or no. I'm not trapping you. I'm asking you: do they still have the power to scupper a deal, the DUP, or are they not as powerful as they used to be?
Well, you see, and that's why I'm not going to be drawn into this because this is not.
Question.
Because actually the real giveaway was the subsequent question about are they not as powerful as they used to be. The DUP are passionate representatives of their communities in Northern Ireland.
Tamara is here with us this morning. Also, I was a bit taken aback by what he was saying about Sir Keir Starmer, who they want on side to get this deal through.
Yes, interesting that when you asked whether it was a compromise, he said that the leader of the opposition didn't understand how negotiating worked, which is, well, strange partly because I think many would say that's exactly how negotiating works. And talking to sources in government, they think that Rishi Sunak has pulled off a very good negotiation. He got a better outcome than many in his party had expected. The criticism yesterday was very muted from Brexiteers and indeed from DUP MPs when he came to present it to the House of Commons. They were very pleased with that. But there have been compromises. Of course, he's agreed to drop the protocol bill. This was the attempt by the government to try and just override bits of the protocol it didn't like as a kind of threat to the EU. That has been dropped. Of course, the EU has dropped its legal action against the UK as well, but there has been give and take on both sides. And that convivial atmosphere with Ursula von der Leyen yesterday is because of the response from the UK side and being willing to take steps like that. In terms of the reaction, yes, it got a very warm reception yesterday, and this is being described as the most important day of Rishi Sunak's premiership because he stood up to his party, he said, this is the deal I've got, and largely they have fallen into line. But there will be difficult days ahead. He's in Northern Ireland today. We don't know yet who he's meeting, but suspicions are that he will be meeting all parties there. The DUP still holding back their judgment. No one in government expects them to come out and say it's fantastic, but whether it's something they can live with and Stormont can get back up and running is going to be the key question.
Yeah, and also who was responsible for the King getting out the best china for Ursula von der Leyen?
Well, it's still not very clear, is it?
I think it looked like it was number 10.
Well, Buckingham Palace say that he met Ursula von der Leyen. He meets any visiting dignitary who wants to meet with the King. And James Cleverly was careful to say that the palace organised his diary to make it possible, but the palace have said that they took the government's advice in terms of the King meeting Ursula von der Leyen. So it does sound like Downing Street at least gave the meeting its blessing.
OK, for now, let's see whether they meet the DUP today and what influence they still have over this government. Who knows? Now, where are you off to on your holidays? Here, perhaps? Spanish island of Mallorca, looking like that. And there's not a swimsuit in sight because it's been hit by blizzard, storms and a red weather warning. The swimming pools are empty, the bars are selling hot coffee, and locals have been warned to expect a foot of snow in the next few days. My goodness me. Still to come, ready, steady. Whose birthday is it today? He's a TV chef. I'm giving you no more clues. That was more than enough clues. Find out after the break. Now, before the break, we were telling you that it's a happy birthday to one of the country's very favourite TV chefs. Ainsley Harriott is marking his 65th birthday today. He's most famous for presenting Ready, Steady, Cook, which saw two teams, the Red Tomatoes, where are they now, and the Green Peppers face off in the kitchen. He's since had a very successful television career and was awarded an MBE in the 2020 New Year's Honours. As a big Arsenal fan, he'll be happy his team sits top of the Premier League today, and also that we've got David Seaman on the programme a little bit later on. Meantime, Wizz Air has announced it will suspend flights to the Moldovan capital of Chisinau over airspace safety worries. The Hungarian low-cost airline announced yesterday that flights will stop on the 14th of March. Its decision follows growing tensions between Russia and Moldova, with missiles targeting Ukraine reportedly entering Moldovan airspace in early February. A 10-hour drive from the capital Chisinau up to Kiev. Now, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that the situation around the town of Bakhmut is becoming increasingly difficult as Russian forces constantly destroy everything that can be used to protect Ukrainian positions. Our international correspondent Alex Rossi reports from eastern Ukraine.
This is the scarred and battered mining town of Volodar. It's held by Ukraine, but is being attacked continuously by Russian forces. We entered with a military escort, as it came under fire again. The soldiers taking us towards frontline positions warn us to space out and not hang around.
We need to move fast over this bit.
There's the constant threat of an artillery strike. It is a gut-churning zigzag across the broken ground. While taking cover, there are moments of quiet before another shell whistles through the sky.
This place has been absolutely devastated by the fighting. Every apartment block has had the windows blown out. There are shell craters all around us. And there's still plenty of incoming fire as well.
About 15,000 people lived here until it was smashed by war. Only a handful remain. There are no services, and they collect rainwater from drain pipes to survive, always staying close to cover.
Что страшно, то страшно. Вот это трошки это самое вышло, а так не выходим. Сидим в подвале. С подвала не выходим. Потому что не знаешь, что ожидать. Может бабахнуть, он видите, вот тут вот все разрывалось, все это. Так что тяжело, очень тяжело.
Perhaps nothing sums up the insanity of the war more than this. The wholesale destruction of people's lives and possessions.
About 2 kilometers, enemy then about 2 kilometers.
The town, we're told, is strategically important, as Ukrainian forces can target Russian supply lines. It's why Moscow's forces are desperate to capture it.
І вони далі йдуть, якби не зупиняються. Вони, то, що я бачу, вони просто по своїм трупам йдуть. Якби вони проходять своїх побратимів, просто йдуть далі. І вони лягають, далі лягають, якби не зупиняються.
Inside a bunker, one of the commanders has just coordinated a counter-attack. He shows us a panorama of the town and the body of a dead Russian commando on a live stream beamed from a drone.
Багато намагаються штурмувати нас, поки справляємось. На жаль, багато в них, скажімо так, дальнобійної мінометної арти. Танки закриті, яких ми не бачимо.
We were taken to another position near the town, this time with a different brigade. A message comes through that Russian troops are on the move. Since the start of the Kremlin's new offensive, they've been very active along the line of contact. The soldiers in the trenches respond by laying down an arc of fire. The razor wire in front of them is a last defence against Russia's human wave assaults.
The trenches in this part of the front extend for miles and miles. Now, the team here, their job is to spot for any movement. The Russians are only a couple of kilometres away, and they also have a Russian radio, and they're able to listen in to their communications.
The soldiers here say they can defend their positions. They are inured to this hell. But Russia is a powerful enemy and doesn't seem to care how many men it pushes forwards. Alex Rossi, Sky News, in eastern Ukraine.
Well, joining us now is the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt. Good morning to you, my lord. I know you always want to tread softly on these matters, but if I could ask you a general question, who's winning this war?
Well, Ukrainians are not losing it, and with the support they've had from the West, they will not lose it. The question is, can Ukrainians win? The Russians are not going to win, but can the Ukrainians win? And if so, when? And of course, I think we all recognise, and particularly having listened recently to President Zelensky, that until they get all the weaponry that they're asking for, main battle tanks, self-propelled artillery and the like, they won't be able to mount a proper counter-offensive and crack the Russians. So, long answer, I'm afraid, Kay, to a short question. The Ukrainians will not lose this. The Russians cannot win it. What we have to do is help the Ukrainians to win on the battlefield.
But we bring other pieces into this chess game, don't we? We bring in China, we bring in Belarus, we bring in Iran, we bring in what's happening in Moldovan airspace. What impact is that going to have?
Well, these are all wider considerations, as you quite correctly point out. Yes, I think the other thing, of course, is interesting, is the attack on the Russian spy plane in Belarus. That's an indication of the lack of support, the lack of universal support that Putin and Russia has in the region. And then, of course, there is the wider question of what support more widely in the world. We see many African nations sitting on the fence. We see China making a very interesting contribution to all this, giving moral support, but until now, not giving physical support as far as we can determine. And India being pretty wary in its relationship and lack of warm support for Russia. So Putin, I think we have to infer, is feeling more and more isolated and undoubtedly under huge pressure himself.
Yeah, but lots of those armies or military that are hoping to help Ukraine are also struggling, some might say. Even our own Defence Secretary says that our military and our defence budget has been hollowed out.
Well, you're right, but of course these are related, but these are separate issues. And it comes to the live issue in this country about whether Ben Wallace will be successful in persuading Jeremy Hunt to give him an uplift in the defence budget. He's making the case for somewhere between 8 and 13 billion pounds extra. Personally, I think that case is very strong. And in a sense, as an ex-former army chief, I would say this again, that a part of that additional money, if he's able to get it, must go to our land forces, not just to increase our own capability, but to make up very rapidly for the arms and munitions that we have given to the Ukrainians. We are being too slow, I think, to let contracts to industry to replenish our stocks and continue to make such stocks available to the Ukrainians. It's one thing saying that we support them. It's another thing to make sure they don't lose. But we absolutely have to take the opportunity of giving them the opportunity to mount a counteroffensive in the late spring, early summer, so that they can win this war and defeat the Russians on the battlefield. That must be the objective.
Let's throw another country into the mix, should we? Saudi Arabia. President Zelensky met with the Saudi foreign minister recently. How do they fit into the mix?
Well, they are an important third-party country as far as all this is concerned. I think we would like to expect that Saudi Arabia will want to support Ukraine. I think Saudi Arabia would probably see that in the round, its best interests are to support the West. And there's a developing relationship between Saudi Arabia and America. It's been a complex relationship up to now. But I think the Saudi rulers are probably coming to the conclusion that taking everything in the round, it's better to side with Ukraine, supported by the West, than to hedge its bets with Russia.
OK, unfortunately, we are out of time, but fascinating stuff as always, my lord. Thank you for joining us on the programme this morning. Thank you.
Thanks, Kay.
Thank you. Still to come in the next hour of the programme, talking about two big stories, one that has developed overnight, the couple missing with their 1-month-old baby. They have been found and arrested in Brighton. Where's the baby? In addition to that, Northern Ireland, the Prime Minister thinks he's got a deal. The DUP said, hold your horses. He said, hang on, I'll get my coat. I'm on my way to Northern Ireland, meeting them today. What might come of that? Stay tuned and find out more.